We are in the middle of a live earthquake sequence in California right now, and if you look at the last 2 months as a whole, the pattern is not subtle. 3 separate earthquake swarms have struck in less than 8 weeks, each one along a slightly different stretch of the same fault system, each one migrating a little further than the last. Here's exactly what's happened, where it's happening, and why the sequence itself matters more than any single earthquake in it. Right now, an earthquake swarm is striking the Coso volcanic field near the Garlock Fault. This is the 3rd swarm in the sequence since July. The first one hit the Fraser Park area, right at the junction where the San Andreas Fault meets the Garlock Fault. A day later, a second and considerably larger swarm struck further east, where the Garlock Fault has a small structural jump near Johannesburg. Now a 3rd swarm has started up on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada at Coso. 3 swarms in sequence, each one stepping eastward along the same fault system in under 2 months. That progression is the actual story here. Let's start with why this particular stretch of California matters so much geologically. The Sierra Nevada functions almost like a geologic anchor for the western United States. Everything happening along this fault junction traces back to a subduction zone that used to sit off the coast of California. That old plate, the Farallon Plate, has been almost entirely consumed. What remains of it today shows up further north as the Juan de Fuca Plate and further south as the Cocos Plate. But directly beneath this stretch of California, there's an old remnant of that system still buried under North America. The San Andreas Fault itself is unusual because of how it formed. The leading hypothesis is that as the old subduction zone was pulled down, it collided with an oceanic spreading ridge that was also being subducted. The 2 features effectively canceled each other out, and what was left behind was the transform fault junction we see today, where instead of one plate diving beneath another, the plates simply slide past each other horizontally. As far as the data shows, this is the largest transform fault junction anywhere along the entire Ring of Fire. That's not a small distinction. Nearly every other major fault boundary around the Pacific Rim is a subduction zone or a rift. California's setup is genuinely unusual. Let's talk practically about what a swarm actually looks like from the data, because the raw earthquake count only tells part of the story. Filtering to just the past week around the Coso field shows roughly 240 recorded earthquakes of all magnitudes in that immediate area, a genuinely large number for such a short window, and such a concentrated location. Zoom out to the broader Johannesburg sequence going back to June, and the total climbs to somewhere around 450 events. Zoom into Fraser Park, and the count for that map area sits closer to 49, with the activity clearly clustered around the single E4.1 event rather than distributed evenly across many smaller shocks. The scale of each swarm is genuinely different, and that variation in size is itself part of what makes tracking the sequence useful. It shows that this isn't one uniform process repeating identically 3 times, but 3 related, structurally distinct events that happen to be marching along the same fault system in the same short window of time. Now to the swarms themselves, because the sequence and progression matter more than any individual number. The first swarm struck Fraser Park, right at the junction of the San Andreas and Garlock Faults on July 12th. A magnitude 4.1 earthquake occurred there, roughly 13 kilometers deep, with geophysicists from the Southern California Seismic Network associating it with activity near the Plato Fault, a smaller structure that intersects this junction. Sitting at the meeting point of 2 major fault systems means that essentially every nearby fault is mechanically connected into the larger governing structure. So a magnitude 4.1 here carries more structural significance than the same magnitude would somewhere more isolated. Notably, this event didn't produce any magnitude 3 aftershocks. It stood alone as a 4.1 against a background of smaller 2.9 and under activity. The very next day, activity jumped east to where the Garlock Fault has a clear structural discontinuity near Johannesburg, a visible jump in the fault trace that's actually been used by geologists to help date historic slip along the Garlock Fault, using offset alluvial fans and fault scarps as a K. End of geological ruler. On July 13th, a magnitude 4.3 struck here, following a magnitude 4.1 that had occurred a month earlier in June, effectively a foreshock to the larger event. This swarm was considerably bigger than the Fraser Park sequence. In total, close to 450 earthquakes have occurred in this area since June, making it the largest release of seismic energy across all 3 swarms, with the bulk of that energy concentrated in the 4.3 event. Now the 3rd swarm has begun at the Coso volcanic field, sitting inside the boundary of the China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada. This is genuinely different terrain from the first 2 swarms. Coso isn't just fault adjacent. It's an active volcanic field. The landforms scattered across this area are old cinder cone volcanoes, and there is magma sitting beneath parts of this system today. It also happens to be one of the largest geothermal energy fields in California, which gives you a sense of how much heat is actually present underground here. Major fault zones run directly through the middle of this volcanic field, which means this swarm sits at the intersection of both tectonic and volcanic processes. As of the most recent data, this swarm has produced around 240 earthquakes in the immediate map area over the past week, with a peak magnitude of 4. That number by itself might not sound dramatic compared to the Johannesburg sequence, but the way it built matters. Some preliminary activity appeared around the 17th and 18th, then the swarm properly ramped up starting on the 20th, with numbers climbing sharply on the 21st, well before the magnitude 4 event occurred. In other words, this wasn't a single sharp earthquake followed by a tail of aftershocks. It was a swarm that built gradually, with dozens of smaller earthquakes preceding the magnitude 4, which is a meaningfully different pattern than a classic main shock aftershock sequence. If this activity turns out to be volcanically driven rather than purely tectonic, a magnitude 4 in that context is a genuinely significant event, because volcanic systems typically don't produce earthquakes of that size without something notable happening beneath the surface. The moment tensor solution for this COSO earthquake shows it was mostly strike slip, meaning the ground moved horizontally past itself, but with a small extensional component layered in, a bit of pulling apart alongside the sideways motion. Both fault plane solutions came back with a steep dip of around 75 degrees. That combination of strike slip motion with a touch of extension is broadly consistent with what you'd expect in a zone where tectonic stress and volcanic geothermal processes are both active at once. It's worth spending a moment on why the volcanic setting at COSO changes the calculus here compared to the first two swarms. Fraser Park and Johannesburg are both purely tectonic settings. The earthquakes there come from stress building and releasing along fault planes, full stop. COSO is different because there's a heat-sour sea underground actively driving a geothermal power field, and a body of magma sitting at depth beneath at least parts of the volcanic complex. In a setting like that, earthquake swarms can be driven by at least 3 distinct processes, sometimes overlapping. Straightforward tectonic S-stress along the faults that cut through the field, fluid movement through fractures as hot water and gas migrate underground, or actual magmatic movement if material is shifting beneath the surface, telling these apart from surface, seismic data LO. Ni is genuinely difficult in the early stages of a swarm, which is part of why a magnitude 4 here carries more analytical weight than a magnitude 4 in a purely tectonic setting. It's not that a magnitude 4 is inherently dangerous, it's that a volcanic field responding with that kind of magnitude tells you the system underneath has real energy in it right now. So step back and look at the full picture. 3 swarms, in sequence, over less than 2 months, each one occurring at a different structural feature along essentially the same fault system, and each one stepping progressively further to the northeast, from the San Andreas Garlock Junction at Fraser Park, to the structural jump in the Garlock Fault at Johannesburg, to the volcanically active COSO field at the edge of the Sierra Nevada. If you zoom out and look at the biggest earthquakes across all of Southern California over the past 3 months, these 3 events, the 4.3 at Johannesburg, the 4.1 at Fraser Park, and the 4 at COSO, are the largest of the entire period. Magnitude 5 and 6 earthquakes are actually fairly rare events across this time frame, when you total up the historical record, which is exactly why these magnitude 4s deserve real attention. They may be the clearest warning signal available before something larger happens, if something larger is coming at all. Swarms are lower in individual magnitude, but they load stress into the surrounding fault network differently than a single large rupture does. Instead of one fault segment releasing a large amount of energy in one event, a swarm distributes smaller ruptures across a wider area over a longer stretch of time, and in the process, it can transfer stress onto neighboring fault segments that weren't directly involved in the original rupture. That stress transfer is exactly why the location of these RMS matters so much. This isn't happening in some isolated corner of the state. It's happening directly at the structural junction between the San Andreas Fault, the Garlock Fault, and the Southern Sierra Nevada, arguably the single most structurally important junction in the entire California fault network. It's worth putting this in historical context because California's largest earthquakes have a track record worth understanding. Every major magnitude 7+ rupture on the San Andreas Fault system over the past 2 centuries has occurred, against a backdrop of major seismic activity happening elsewhere along the broader Pacific Rim in the months prior. The 1952 Kern County earthquake, magnitude 7.5, followed a magnitude 8.1 in Japan by about 4 months, and was followed itself by the magnitude 9.0 Kamchatka Earth-Q, AK later that same year. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake followed a magnitude 8.8 event off Ecuador and Colombia by roughly 3 months. The seismic burst of 1812 in Southern California came within about a year of major activity along the New Madrid fault system and a significant double rupture sequence in Venezuela. The 1838 San Andreas rupture followed. The Valdivia earthquake in Chile, one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded, by 7 to 8 months. The 1857 Fort Tejon earthquake came about 2 years after New Zealand's largest earthquake on record. And the 1868 Hayward Fault rupture followed a sequence of massive earthquakes in Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, along with the largest earthquake ever recorded in Hawaii, all within the same year. I want to be direct about how to read that pattern. It is not proof of a causal mechanism linking distant Ring of Fire earthquakes to California ruptures, and there is no established seismological process that would make a large earthquake in Chile or Japan directly trigger a rupture on the San Andreas months later. What it does show is that California's largest earthquakes have occurred during periods of generally elevated global seismic activity, which may simply reflect the fact that any sufficiently long historical record will show major earthquakes clustering somewhere in the world within a year of any other major EA earthquake, given how frequently magnitude 7+ events occur globally. Whether there's a genuine physical connection or simply a statistical coincidence born from how earthquake frequency works at a global scale is a real open question. And it's one worth treating with real caution rather than certainty in either direction. What is worth taking seriously, geologically, is the structural picture. And nearly the entire Pacific Rim, from South America up through Mexico and Central America, and from New Zealand up through the Western Pacific, consists of subduction zones, one plate diving beneath another. California's transform fault junction, where plates slide past each other rather than one diving under the other, is a genuine geological outlier along that entire boundary. It tends to release stress more slowly and less frequently than the subduction zones surrounding it, but when it does rupture, the resulting earthquakes can reach magnitude 8 or larger, as they've done historically along the San Andreas. So where does that leave the current sequence? Right now, no magnitude 5 or magnitude 6 earthquake has struck anywhere in the system over the past month. That's worth saying plainly, because it puts the current activity in proper context. This is a sequence of moderate S-swarms, not a major rupture. But 3 swarms in under 2 months, each occurring at a structurally significant location, each migrating progressively along the same fault junction, is a real and notable pattern worth tracking closely. The open question now is whether this activity continues migrating east into the Mojave Shear Zone and areas like Owens Valley, or whether it begins shifting back west, the way historical sequences sometimes do, once an eastern rupture cycle has run its course and the system moves into a longer loading and healing phase. The last major magnitude 7+ earthquake to strike this eastern shear zone was the 2019 Ridgecrest earthquake. Whether the current swarm sequence represents a continuation of that eastern activity or a transition towards something else is genuinely difficult to say with confidence, and it's the question worth watching most closely going forward. If you're asking which region is more likely to see the next significant earthquake, northern or southern California, the honest answer is that both regions carry real accumulated strain. But southern California currently shows somewhat more built-up energy across this fault network specifically. Northern California did see a magnitude 5.6 near Redwood Valley recently, which may have released some of the pressure building in that region for now. Weighing both regions against each other, Southern California is the slightly more likely candidate for the next Larguer event in this general time frame, though that's an assessment based on relative strain accumulation, not a specific prediction of timing or magnitude. Here's the practical takeaway. This is not a forecast that a major earthquake is imminent, and nobody with real expertise in this field would frame it that way. What this is a legitimate and trackable pattern. 3 earthquake swarms in under 2 months, each occurring at a genuinely significant structural location along the southern San Andreas-Garlock Fault System M, each migrating progressively along that system, with the most recent swarm now overlapping an active volcanic field that also happens to be one of California's largest geothermal energy sources. That combination of factors, location, migration pattern, and the volcanic overlay at COSO, is what makes this sequence worth paying close attention to right now, independent of any single magnitude number. Magnitude 4 earthquakes are common enough on their own that any one of them, viewed in isolation, wouldn't be particularly newsworthy. It's the sequence, the locations, and the progression that make this moment different from ordinary background seismicity. Whether this resolves quietly, the way the vast majority of earthquake swarms do, or whether it turns into the leading edge of something larger, is not something that can be predicted with any real confidence from where we stand right now. What can be said is that this is a real, ongoing, trackable geological sequence, unfolding along one of the most structurally important fault junctions in the entire state, and it deserves to be watched closely as it continues to develop. For anyone wanting to track this themselves, the useful signals to watch are straightforward. First, location. Does new activity continue stepping northeast past Coso, further into the Owens Valley area, or does it start appearing back to the west, closer to the coast? Second, D, depth. Shallow swarms in a volcanic field like Coso carry a different set of implications than deeper tectonic swarms along the Garlock Fault proper, since shallow activity is more likely to be connected to fluid or magmatic movement rather than pure fault slip. Third, rate. Does the number of daily events keep climbing the way it did in the run-up to the Johannesburg 4.3? Or does it plateau and taper off the way most swarms eventually do? The vast majority of earthquake swarms, historically, resolve without producing anything larger than their initial peak magnitude. B. The ones that don't resolve quietly tend to show exactly this kind of pattern beforehand. Sustained activity building over days before the largest event, rather than a single sharp main shock arriving out of a quiet background. That's where things stand as of right now. No magnitude 5s, no magnitude 6s in the past month across this system. 3 swarms migrating east to northeast at 3 genuinely significant structural locations in under 60 days. Keep watching the data as it comes in, because if this sequence is going to tell us anything about what comes next, it's going to tell us through exactly this kind of pattern. Not through a single dramatic headline number, but through where the smaller earthquakes keep showing up and how quickly they keep moving.